everyone. We're going to take a few minutes today to talk about how to write good thesis statements. The information in this video will help prepare you to write thesis statements for papers in all of your college courses, and it will define what you will be expected to write as thesis statements for papers in this course. Make sure to study this video carefully and take notes so that you can follow these guidelines in writing thesis statements for the rest of the papers in this course. First, let's take a look at what a thesis statement is. It's a statement, usually of one sentence, that summarizes and states the major points discussed in the paper. Note that the thesis statement is one sentence, not 2, 3, or 4 sentences, and that it is a sentence, not a question. Now, the thesis statement can appear at various points in a paper. In some cases, writers choose to state the thesis in the conclusion or to not state it directly in the paper at all. But it's best if the thesis statement appears at the end of the introduction to a paper. And in this course, I will expect the thesis statement to appear at the end of the introduction. Specifically, the thesis statement names the topic of the paper and then makes a comment about the paper. The comment is the point that you want your paper to make about the topic. There are 2 parts to a thesis statement. The first part names the topic of the paper, and the second part makes a comment on the topic. Now, as we know from studying grammar in grade school and high school, sentences have 2 major divisions: the complete subject and the complete predicate. The complete subject is the noun that serves as the subject of the sentence and all of its modifying words and clauses. The complete predicate is the verb of the sentence and all of its modifying words and clauses. In a thesis statement, the complete subject is the part of the statement that names the topic of the paper. The complete predicate is the part of the statement that makes a comment about the topic. As a very basic example, a thesis statement that says, "My high school prom was beautiful and romantic," would indicate that the topic of the paper is my high school prom, and the comment on the paper is that it was beautiful and romantic. Now, the thesis statement indicates the topic of the paper in the subject and then makes a comment about the topic in the predicate. The entire rest of the paper is written to prove that the comment is valid about the topic. Let's take a look at an example that we're going to be using throughout the rest of this video. You might even want to write this example thesis statement down because we will be talking about it for the next few minutes. The example is cats and dogs are different in size, elimination habits, and trainability. Now, this thesis statement could be used for a paper comparing cats and dogs. The first part of the thesis statement, the subject of the sentence, tells readers that the topic of the paper is cats and dogs. The second part of the thesis statement, the complete predicate, tells readers that the paper will prove that cats and dogs are different in size, elimination habits, and trainability. Now, it also tells readers that they can look for a section that deals with how cats and dogs are different in terms of size. It also indicates that there will be a second section of the paper that discusses how cats and dogs are different in terms of elimination habits. Finally, it tells readers that there will be a section that discusses how cats and dogs are different in terms of trainability. Readers would expect to see those 3 sections and only those 3 sections, and they would expect each section to contain information that supports that section's discussion. For example, they would expect to see a section on how cats and dogs differ in terms of size, and they'd expect that section to discuss size and nothing else. So we see that the thesis statement indicates that the paper will work to prove that the comment made in the thesis statement, that there are differences in size, eliminations, and trainability is true about the topic, cats and dogs. It also tells readers that that's exactly what the paper will do and that that's all the paper will do. Now, one mistake students sometimes make is that they replace a thesis statement with a sentence that simply states the topic of the paper. But a statement of topic is not a thesis statement. Okay, what do I mean by statement of topic? A sentence that begins with something along the lines of this paper is about or this paper will discuss is not a thesis statement. It is a statement of topic. Okay, I'll prove it to you. Let's look at an example and analyze it in terms of what we've discussed about the two parts of a thesis statement. I think then you'll see why statements of topic don't work as thesis statements. For example, let's say that a student writing about the difference between cats and dogs includes the sentence, this paper will discuss the difference between cats and dogs. Now let's analyze this sentence in terms of what we've learned about thesis statements. The first part of the thesis statement names the topic of the paper. The first part of this sentence is this paper is about, which means the topic of the paper is the paper. Why would anyone write a paper about the paper itself? Okay, the second part of the thesis statement makes a comment on the topic, and the rest of the paper will be devoted to proving that the comment is true about the topic. The second part of this statement is, we'll discuss the differences between cats and dogs. So this paper is written to prove that this paper discusses the differences between cats and dogs? No. That can't be what the paper is written to prove, but not in college. So this statement is not a thesis statement. Worse, it's a complete waste of time in short papers, such as the papers we're writing in this class. If a reader can't tell what the topic of your paper is, the paper has more problems than this sentence can solve, believe me. So for this class, don't include any sentence in any paper that states what the paper is about. Instead, name the topic in a good thesis statement that also indicates what your paper will prove about the topic. Now, the second part of a strong thesis statement will include a plan of development. The plan of development is a list of the main points that the paper will make about the topic. Returning to our earlier example, which I advised you to write down, cats and dogs are different in size, elimination habits, and trainability. The plan of development is size, elimination habits, and trainability. This statement tells readers that those are the main points about cats and dogs that the paper will discuss. Now, in most cases, the main points named in the plan of development will correspond to the major divisions in the paper. The thesis statement we've been working with about cats and dogs would most likely lead into a paper that has a section that discusses the difference between cats and dogs' sizes, another section that discusses the difference between cats and dogs' elimination habits, and a third section that discusses the differences between cats and dogs' trainability. The list in the plan of development should mirror the organization of the paper. In fact, in a comparison paper, such as the one we've been using as an example, the list of the two subjects compared also mirrors the organization of the paper. Let's see what a reader would expect if he or she saw the thesis statement, cats and dogs are different in size, elimination habits, and trainability. First, the subject of the thesis statement, cats and dogs, tells the reader that cats will be discussed before dogs throughout the paper. No matter which aspect is being discussed or what is said about it, cats will always be discussed before dogs, beginning with the first sentence of the paper all the way to the last sentence of the paper. The reader also would expect the paper to be organized so that size is discussed first, elimination habits are discussed second, and trainability is discussed last. A strong thesis statement is a really good tool. I did a year of grad work in cognitive psychology, focusing on how the brain deals with written communication. There are a couple of theories, and I'm going to oversimplify one tremendously to explain how thesis statements help readers. We know that people understand information better and remember it better if they can link it with stuff they already know. Let's think of the brain as a filing cabinet. The plan of development in the thesis statement kind of tells readers which drawers in the filing cabinet to open to store the new information in. It helps prepare the reader's brain to connect the information in the paper to information they already have on file in their brains. And that will help the reader understand your points better and even remember them. And as a writer, that's what you want your reader to do. Not only does a thesis statement help us as writers by clarifying our point to readers, it also can help as we draft our paper. After we've used pre-writing techniques and, in many cases, research to discover what we're going to say, we can come up with a list of the main points we want to make. If we then write a working thesis statement that summarizes those main points in a plan of development, we can refer to it to help us organize the paper and make sure each section is focused well. The thesis statement we've been using as an example would remind the writer that he or she needs a section on size and that everything about size will be included in that section of the paper and that that section will not include anything except information about size. A good working thesis statement will kind of serve as a map to keep us moving in the right direction in papers and keep our paragraphs and sections focused and organized. Because a working thesis is so helpful to writers, you will be required to include a working thesis statement on the outlines required for the rest of the papers in this course. Now, notice I've been using the phrase working thesis statement for a couple of minutes here. You might be wondering why I include the word working. Well, we know the papers use emphatic organization, or most of them do. Now, emphatic organization's guidelines indicate that the most important point of a paper should be developed with the most support. But we can't really always know which point will actually be developed with the most support until we write our zero draft, right? And that means after we draft our paper, we might find that our organization changes from what we stated in the outline. Now, that's perfectly fine. But if we do change the organization of the paper, we need to change the organization of the plan of development in the thesis statement before we submit the paper too, because the organization of the thesis statement must mirror the organization of the paper. Well, I think that wraps up what you need to know about thesis statements. Thank you so much for studying this presentation. If you have any questions about thesis statements or anything in the class, please know that I am here to help you and I want to help you. All you need to do is drop me an email through Canvas. Well, until we talk again, work hard, sure, but also take some time to enjoy life.